Okay, so in this video we're just going to quickly go through a few important ideas about lipids. I think this sometimes can be a bit confusing, but we're just going to talk about the important principles of them at the start as regard to molecules, rather than much more than that at this stage, and we're going to use them particularly before we go into ideas of membranes and cell membranes. So what is the definition of a lipid? Well, it's a biomolecule that is, firstly, it's insoluble in water, and secondly, it's highly soluble in organic solvents. So, in organic solvents, and this means and these are sort of quite a wide definition, really, isn't it? So it gives such a really diverse group of molecules which have a lot of important physiological functions. So I'll give a few examples. Some of the functions that they're involved in is, most importantly, what we're going to talk about in sort of the next video, is their role in membranes. And what's so important about the principles is that this insolubility in water really is important for allowing them to develop the development of selective permeability, and that the prevention of the passage of water soluble solutes, as we'll talk about in a later video. But they've got other very important physiological uses as well. They're an important energy store, and finally they're also molecules that are used as signal molecules. So hopefully there you've got got an idea that it's quite a broad definition, but this is the definition that it's important to know, that they're the biomolecules that are insoluble in water, but very soluble in an organic solvent, and they've got a few different roles in human physiology. Perhaps one of the most important that I think we're going to talk about is in membranes, but their energy store, their use as an energy store is also really important, and we'll talk about that in later videos as well. But don't forget, they are important in signal molecules as well. That we'll talk about that not quite as much. So I'm now we'll go through some the important ones that that's important to know about. The first one you probably have heard of is fatty acids. Fatty acids, and they're not quite the same as it's proteins. We talked about how amino acids are the building blocks of proteins, and are really the core principles that you can build up from different amino acids to create proteins. Fatty acids aren't quite the same. They are they can be considered a building block of many types of many other lipids, but not in the same way as amino acids. That they don't add together and they don't polymerize in the same way as amino acids do, but they have taken a more complex function. But as we'll talk about fatty acids, you can hopefully start to appreciate how they come together to build different types of lipids. But they're probably one of the most important to be aware of. Another important type are the steroids, and you probably heard of these as well. This is a group of lipids that has a common structure, in the same way that fatty acids have a common structure. These are probably these two together could really be considered to be the two core building blocks, I suppose, the two core starting points of lipids, which we can consider when we consider the different specific lipids. We can look at how they stem from these to derive their function, and sort of building on that idea, some specific examples of other lipids that are important include phospholipids, which are expansions on the fatty acid structure, but giving it more of a slightly different functional role, and very similar to them, the glycolipids. And sort of these, there's we can think of other types, but these are sort of the four that I'm going to just go over their structure and a bit about their function in this video, just to consider, basically to prepare us for some of the future videos on mainly on membrane, on cell membranes. So we'll move on to talk about these really. So let's start with fatty acids. I've talked about how fatty acids can be considered as one of the building blocks of lipids, of a different type of lipids, in the same way cholesterols are a slightly different building block. And a fatty acid is very simply it's a hydrocarbon chain. It's a collection of of carbon molecules, and you've got your hydrogens coming off it, like this, and it's usually represented as a chain like this. So you've got a chain of your different carbons there. This is just lots of carbons with your hydrogens coming off, and at the end, remember, it's an acid. So we've got a carboxylic acid group. So there we go, your oxygen and your OH there, and that's it. Fairly simple, organic molecule. You've got a chain of a number of hydrocarbons, of a number of carbons. The chain length can vary. It can be it's usually between 14 and 24 carbons, 16 and 18 carbons being the most common. And it doesn't have to just be in that straight shape. You can also have what's called unsaturated. So instead of, if you picture all these to be single bonds, as in up here between the carbon molecules, you can actually get some where we've got the carbon chain going like this, and you've got a double bond. You've got a double bond between the carbon molecules, and the chain continues. And what's important about this structure? Well, if you picture here, you've got a very long non-polar compartment of the part of the molecule, and at the end here you've got your carboxylic acid group. And as you've probably seen before, these groups are often depicted as a if we move it along a bit further here, as a carbon chain. They're often drawn like this, in that in water, in solution, this is this becomes a polar group. So you lose it's an acid. It donates its proton, it's the hydrogen here, and you get this negative charge spread over the end of the molecule. So you've got a molecule now which is a long non-polar compartment. As we mentioned in the definition of a lipid, it's not soluble in water, and this long chain provides that function. It's not soluble. And so we'll talk about in later videos, I think, and a bit later in this video, this is used to build a number of different lipids. So I'm going to talk about the sort of second building block, second group of lipids, or this second important class of lipids, and that's the steroids. And a sort of, to compare it with for instance proteins. We talked about proteins. You've got amino acids are the core building blocks. Amino acids have a similar structure between all of them, and they polymerize to form proteins. Well, it's not quite the same with lipids. We've got amino fatty acids that they're common to each other. They've got this sort of common shape. They've got this long chain with a carboxylic acid head. Well, steroids are different from them, but they're similar to each other. They have a common shape, common structure between all of them, and that it's a different structure, but it still has the functional characteristics of a lipid, which is, as remind you what we talked about at the start. It's insoluble in water, but it's highly soluble in an organic solvent, and it's a structure that is used as a basis for a lot of important, for instance, hormones and other structures like cholesterol. I'll draw it for you now. The steroid core, it's got 4 carbon rings to it. Remember, we sort of in basic biochemistry drawing, each corner of this shape is a carbon molecule, and you've got hydrogens coming off it. So it's 1, 2, 3 6-sided carbon molecules and 1 5-sided carbon molecule there. It's carbon ring. So as you can see there, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 carbon rings, and 3 of them have got six carbons. The fourth one's got 5, and this is this is a core structure of it. This is a core shape, and it's modified in in the human body in many different ways to produce a variety of different structures. And we can see here we've got two very different shapes, but 2 very different core structures. You've got the fatty acid at the top, you've got steroids here, but they're both lipids, and they're used in different ways by the body. An important steroid that I'll show you now to give an example of how it's actually modified is that the molecule cholesterol. It's, for instance, an important group. It's got an OH group here, and it's got a hydrocarbon chain up here. It's got a CH3 there, a hydrocarbon chain here, with some groups at the end there. And yeah, this is an important molecule. It's really important for membranes, as we'll talk about. Testosterone, it's got this same steroid shape, steroid four rings, with different alterations of this, and they've both got the same sort of same functional characteristics, but two very different structures. And these two sort of shapes you can sort of consider to be the building blocks of lipids, or the most common ones anyway. So I want to talk about one more that is going to be really important to be aware of when we talk about in the next video, talking about membranes, and that is it's the phospholipids. Now, we've talked about fatty acid change, and I said that it's a bit like the building block, and it's basically it's one of the components of the phospholipids. It's all the phospholipids is it's a molecule that's built up of it's got 4 components to it. It's got the fatty acids. It's got two or more fatty acids. It's got a base group. It's got a base structure to it, often glycerol. It's got a phosphate head, and it's got an alcohol as well. And I'll draw the shape out now, just so we understand its shape for the next video. You've got the fatty acid chains here. We've got the carboxylic acid head there. I'll draw 2 of them out here, so we know the shape. There we go. So we've got two fatty acid chains there, and they're attached to, we'll use a different colour here, they're attached to, for instance, in this molecule will have a glycerol. So glycerol with its that there, and that's in turn attached to a phosphate head. So we'll use there's our phosphate here, and we'll draw it as its ionized form. So there we go. So you can see we've sort of got three main parts to it really. We'll talk about the fatty acid legs, the glycerol base, and got the phosphate head here. And I'll draw a simplified version of it just at the bottom here. The version that we're going to use in the next videos, and it's often a schematic representation. Is that you've got the fatty acid legs here, like that, and you've got the head. And the importance of this is that, as we've talked about with lipids, we talked about we've used the fatty acid shape here, fatty acid structure, and added it and built it into a different molecule here. We've got the functional characteristics of the fatty acid, which is it's not soluble. It's very non-polar at this end. But we've modified it. We've got a phosphate head on it at this end, and we've got a bit that's polarized and that's soluble. And this type of molecule is called an amphipathic molecule. I'll write it here. molecule, and this type of molecule is really important for membranes, as we're going to talk about in the next video. You've got this non-polar end, and you've got this polar end. You've got this non-soluble end, and a water-soluble end. You know, to use different terminology, you've got hydrophobic end and you've got a hydrophilic end. And next video we're going to talk about how this is really important for cell membranes. So quick recap then, you know, remember, definition of a lipid: it's a biomolecule that's insoluble in water, highly soluble in organic solvents. You've got sort of two sort of common recurring structures. You've got the fatty acid, which was one of the most common, and you've got the steroid, the basic steroid structure, and they can be built into other lipid molecules. A really important example of that is the phospholipid. We've just drawn the shape of it here, and we'll talk about the phospholipids and their importance in cell membranes in the next video.